Have you ever wanted to learn a modern JavaScript framework like React but didn't know the best project to get started with? In this video, we will be making a personal portfolio website that anyone can make even if you have never coded React before. You will then be able to take the patterns and lessons learned in this video and apply them to your own personal projects. In this video, you will learn React style components, which manages all of your styles, so the design of your website. We will be handling data objects, so all of the data on our portfolio will be fetched through an object that we create in our React application. We will be looking at props and how they are handled and used in React. We will also be building reusable components. We will be working with third-party libraries such as Material UI for icons and also Modal pop-ups. We want the portfolio to have a responsive design, so we will be using Flexbox in this build. We will also be using higher order components, which is also a key feature in React. And then finally, we will deploy our portfolio website onto the web so that you can give it to your employers and add it to your socials. Okay, so in this video, we will be building this portfolio website. As you can see here, we have a navbar, we have an About Me section on here where we are pulling data from our data object that we will also be creating. If we scroll down, we have our clients that we are working with. So you can replace this with your clients over here. We also have skills. So these are our skills that we are presenting to our prospective job opportunity. Education and experience. So this will be a responsive Flexbox layout where we will be filtering our data based on the year. So as you can see, from 2021 to present, 2016 to 2020, and so on. We have our latest project section on here. So what you could also do is click through to a new page on this one. So this is just showing what projects we have worked on in the past. And then finally, we have a button here that if we click on, a modal pops up, and then the user can also click through, so then we can get contacted for our prospective job application. Okay, so there are a few things that we need to install on our machine before we start building a React project. So the first thing is we need to have Node.js installed onto our machine. So if you go onto nodejs.org and click on here, you can then download the recommended version for Node.js. So at the minute it is 18.12. So if you just download this and install, I already have this installed on my machine, so I will leave that for now. The second thing that we need is a GitHub profile. So if you go onto github.com and click on the header, there will be a sign up option and you sign up and create your profile. You will then get a profile similar to this, even though this is customized. What you will have is once you go into your profile, so if you click here, you get to this screen and then you have an overview tab, a repositories tab, and so on. What we want to do is click onto the repositories tab, and then if we click new, this essentially will create a new project for us that we can install onto our GitHub profile, which we will then later be able to use to deploy our application onto the web. So I'm just going to create this now, and I'm just going to name this React portfolio. And then what we will do is we will leave it as public. If we scroll down and create a repository, so now what we have done is we have created a repository. So now that we have created a repository, what will happen is we will create code on our local machine. And then once that code is ready to be published and deployed onto the web, we will upload our code into our GitHub profile, and then we will deploy onto the web. The final prerequisite we need is Visual Studio Code to be able to code our application on our machine. So I'm using the IDE of Visual Studio Code. So whatever machine you are on, Windows or Mac, if you just download the recommended one and then install, and then we will be able to start our project. Okay, so now what we want to do is set up the project. So I'm going to open my terminal. So if you're using Windows, this will be PowerShell. If you open this up, here what we want to do is navigate to the folder that we want to set up the project with. So in my case, I want to set it up in my YouTube folder. So to see where I am currently in my folder structure, if we type in ls, this will tell us where we are. And then I now want to navigate to my YouTube folder here. So all you do is cd, which means change directory, to YouTube, like so. And then if you press enter, and now if I press ls again, as you can see all of my builds in here. What I want to do in this folder is I want to copy the project that we have made in GitHub. So this one here. So I'm just going to click the copy button in here. So this copies the URL to the clipboard. if I then go onto my YouTube terminal over here, and then if I type in git clone and then paste in that URL and press enter, what has happened is you have copied this project here, even though it is empty and it says you have cloned an empty repository. When it comes to uploading our code into GitHub, it will then upload the code into this specific repository over here. So there is one more step, which is we need to download Git for this functionality to work. So to be able to use the commands of what we have just used here, so the git clone command or any git command, we will need to download Git, which is from git-scm.com/downloads. I will leave all of these in the description below, but what we need is this to be able to run this command that we have done over here. So please download this also. So going back into my code now, I have now cloned this project in here. So if I type in ls now, as you can see here, you can see React Portfolio. So we want to go into that directory. So if we type in cd React Portfolio, like so, and now ls again. So now we are in the correct project. What we want to do now is open the project. So if we type in code space dot and then press enter, this will then open our Visual Studio Code, which is what we downloaded earlier on. So if I open this out, and now if I go on the top and terminal and click new terminal, essentially we have access to everything in here now and not in our actual Mac terminal. So to install a React project, we are going to be using something called Vite, which has a template for React in there, so we don't have to create a folder structure from scratch. So if we type into our terminal npm create Vite, the name of our portfolio, so in this case I'm going to name this as the React portfolio or portfolio-yt for YouTube, a space dash template, and then a space again for React. So this is telling Vite that we want to install the React template. So if we press enter, okay, so now that we have installed our application, we have a few more steps that we need to do. So we need to go into the directory of portfolio-yt. So if we just copy this, cd portfolio-yt, and then we also need to run npm install, which installs all of the dependencies that we need. And then finally, to start the project in our browser, we just need to run npm run dev and press enter. So now this will get the application started on this URL here. So if we copy this and go to our browser and paste this in, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to close off my GitHub here. So now we have our completed code over here, and then we have our new project here. So when we install Vite, this is some boilerplate that gets added into the application. So we will eventually replace this with this application over here. So if I go back into my code now, and in my app.jsx in here, what we will do is everything within the div class name of app, we're just going to delete that. And what the aim is of the app.jsx is we want to keep this as simple and lightweight as possible. So the functionality with React is everything should be done in singular reusable components. So essentially what we want to do is we want to have a homepage component in here. So if we delete everything out of here, we don't need the app CSS and we don't need the logo, and we also don't need the use state. So instead, we're just going to import React from React like so. And then what I want to do in this return block is create a home component. So we will create that in just a moment. But for now, I'm going to close this, and to import a component, all we do is like so. So essentially what this is doing is we want to have a component called home showing every time we go into our application. This can then get extended further on as we add more pages, and that is to do with React Router DOM, which you can see in another video of mine on my YouTube channel. But for this project, we will only have the one component, which is the home, and this will be a layout. So we need to create a folder structure for this. So now in my source folder, what I want to do is create a new folder in here named layouts. And then in my layouts, I want to create a new folder called home. And in home, I'm going to have two new files in here. First one is index.jsx, which is your index folder. So what we are creating, I'm going to use my React functional snippet, so RFCE, and press tab. And this will be named home. So RFCE is a shortcut to create a React functional component. So if we go into our extensions over here and type in React, and if we click on this one, this is what I am using to get a snippet. So RFCE is the one. So if we install this extension over here, And what I want to do is render this is the home component, like so. And now if I go back into my app.js and on here, click Control and space, as you can see, the import is showing up. So all we need to do is import home from layout/home, like so. And now if I save all, the home component should be rendering on my application as opposed to what was showing beforehand. So if I go onto my application here, you can see it says this is the home component and we are now rendering that. What I also want is the styling to be correct. So first of all, in app.css, I'm just going to delete this file because we don't need it. The styling will come from style component, so we will install that later on. And for each component, it will have its own styling on there. And for global styling, I'm going to go into index.css over here. And for all of our links, I'm going to copy what I have currently. So all of the A tags I'm going to replace. We're going to have a color of gray. And when we hover over the links, it's going to be black. The body itself, I'm going to remove this because essentially what is happening is the application here is rendering everything in the middle and we want to work our way from the top down. So if we delete the display of flex and place items off center, and then if we scroll further down, we want to have a border color for our buttons of gray when we hover over, and if I scroll further down, everything else should be fine. So now if I save and go onto my browser, as you can see, we're working from the top down. And again, what we will do is we will work with style components to add the styling on individually to each individual component. Okay, so looking at the final build, if we break it down, there are certain sections on here that are quite similar, as you can see. So what we need to do is we need to map out the project or the homepage as a whole. So if we go back to our code and we close down the app.jsx and go into the home folder over here, in here we want to almost create some comments. So first comment I want to do is I want to create a nav component. So if I save now, I also want to create a headline component. So add another comment in here of headline. And then if we go back to our application, we have an about section here. We also have clients, skills, education and experience, latest projects, and then the contact. So as you can see, there's a common theme here of sections that we have in our application. So there will be a way to create this similar section where it has the border at the bottom and a title. So what we will do is create a higher order component for this later on. So it's a common theme, and then in there we render out different children. So we will look at that later on. So this is where we cover the higher order component portion of the application. So going back to my structure, so I have the nav, the headline. I want to add the rest of the sections on here, so I will add them just now. So now, as you can see here, we have created all of the modules that we will be using in the application. So what I need to do now is in my source folder, I need to create two new folders in here. The first folder is going to be the modules. So this is going to section off each individual section here so that we can create individual components for these modules. And then the other folder I'm going to create is a components folder. So this will be for the reusable common components that we can reuse across the application. So components. And then finally, what I also want to add is a new folder for all of our data that we will be using in this application. So first off, what I want to do is replace this div with a main tag. So this will be the main part of our application, but because we are using style components, I'm going to install that first of all. So if we close our terminal down and we are in the relevant directory over here, so what I want to do is to install a third-party application. If we type in npm I or npm install and then the application name, so in this case it will be styled components, and press enter. This will then install the third-party application that you want to use. So now, whilst that's installing, if I go into the browser and type in npm here, and if we go into npmjs.com, here you can search for all the packages that you require. So if I needed style components, so if I type this in here and pressed enter, as you can see, this is the package we have installed. So npm stands for Node Package Manager, which is all of the packages that we can install in our React or Node.js projects. If we go onto here, you can see the documentation, and we can also click onto the repository here and the homepage here, and we can get more information on how the project is used. So if I close this off and go back into my code, we now have style components installed. So if I press up in my terminal to npm run dev and press enter again. So going back into my home folder, I'm going to create a new file in here now called styled.jsx. So all I want to do now is import styled from, and then it's going to be from styled components, which is the package that we have just installed over here. And then what I want to do is create a container, so export const of container like so, which is equal to styled. And then this is where you put your semantic HTML tag in here. So because it's the container of the home page, I'm just going to name this as main. So style.main, which is the HTML tag we want to use. And then all I want to do for this styling is I want to add a margin of 40px on the left and the right only. So that is the styling complete. So essentially we are exporting this container, and now we need to import it in our index.jsx file. So instead of main now, we can just put in the container, and then all we need to do is import it from style like so. So now what I want to do is if I click save all, we won't see anything yet. So I'll just render a p tag saying portfolio site. And then if we go into here, as you can see, the margin is now applied on either side. So now if I go onto my completed application, we will then start creating the navigation component. Okay, so now that we have the site all set up, first component I'm going to make is the nav bar. So we're going to put this nav bar in the components folder over here because this can be used globally across the entire site. So in components, I'm going to create a new folder named nav like so. And what we will be doing in each component or each folder for each component is we're going to have an index.jsx file, and we're also going to have a styled.jsx file. So in the index.jsx file, if we just do rfce and then name this one nav, so now the nav is being exported. And then what I want to do is save and then go back into my home component or home layout here. And then instead of the comment, we now can import the nav. So control spacebar on the nav, and then that imports the nav from the components. So now if we save and go into the browser, as you can see, the nav is being imported in now. So going back into my code, we can then edit the nav component. So essentially what the nav will have is an image and a list of social media icons. So what we will do is we will import them from Material UI. So this will be its own component itself, and then we can also reuse this component elsewhere. So we will be doing that next. So going back into my code now, I now want to render an image. So I'll just bring in my code over here. And what we essentially want to do is copy the styles also. So in my style.jsx, I'm going to have a container. The container is going to be styled of nav because we are using the nav. We're going to give it a display of flex, which puts everything into a row. So with desktop, everything goes from top down. We want to put it into a row so it's side by side. We want to align items centrally on the horizontal axis. And then we want to justify the content as space between. So this creates a space between all children elements, and then also a padding of 20 pixels. The image width is going to be of 200 pixels. So with the logo, it's going to have a styled image of 200 pixels. So now going back into here, we need to control space, import the container from the /styled, and also the logo from /styled. I have my own image in here for my logo that I'm importing from our website, and the social media part of it is not created, so we need to create that. So I will just comment that out. So if I now save all and then go into our application, as you can see here, the Imran's code part is rendering. We just need to create the social media component now. So again, in components, I'm going to create a new folder in here named social media. So this again is being put in the components folder because it can be reused elsewhere on the application. Again, creating a new file named index.jsx and styled.jsx. And now in my social media component, I'm just going to do rfce, and then this will be named social media, like so. And essentially what I want this component to be is a list of social media links. So what we need to do is install Material UI icons and Material UI itself. So if I go into my browser, if you go on mui.com and click Get Started, and on the left click Installation, because we are using npm, we just need to copy this, go back into my terminal, and then close the terminal off and paste on here. So it will install all of them dependencies for the third-party application that we are using. And going back into my browser, if I have any other steps, I can also import them in. As you can see here, you can install Google Web Fonts and icons also. What I want to work with is Material UI icons. So if we scroll down to Material icons, and then here you can see there is another install that we need to work with. So if we copy this, there's an entire library of icons that we could use. So if I wanted this add circle, all I need to do is click this and then import it in. As you can see, it copied it to the clipboard, and then we can paste that in, which we will do later on. So for now, what I'm going to do is copy this and go back into my terminal over here at the bottom. The first step has now installed, so I just need to paste in the second one. And now that's installed, all I need to do is run my application again by pressing up till you get to npm run dev and press enter. And what I'm going to do is bring in my code for my social media, which is essentially a list of URLs in here. So what I am doing is I've imported the Facebook icon, Instagram, LinkedIn, and GitHub, and then I've wrapped them around in a href that opens up into a new tab. As you can see, these are my links that I have added on here. And the way to import a icon is similar to how you would a React component. So now all I need to do is create this container in the /styled. So similar to how we did it before. So import styled from styled components, export const of container, giving it a display of flex, align item center. This CSS property creates a gap in between each element or each child in the container. And then also we want to have a clickable element, so we give it a cursor pointer also. So now all that is left is we need to import this social media component into the Nav component. So now if I control / on that, or command / and then control space, and now we have our social media component imported also. So now if I save all and then we go into our application, you can see here now when we hover over, we have our cursor pointer, and if we click on one, so if I click on my GitHub, this then opens up a new tab into my GitHub portfolio here. So now as you can see, because we have created the social media component, if we wanted to reuse this elsewhere, all we need to do is import it in like so. Okay, so now we've created the nav bar. What we need to do is create the headline. So that is this little section here. So with this one, what we are doing is we are fetching data from the data object that has certain information on there that we render onto the page over here. So in most applications, what we would do is we would fetch some data from an API or an external application, and then we would render that out onto the page. But for now, what we will do is create a data object mimicking an API where we would have the data readily available, and then we can render that onto the UI. So going into our home layout, we now need to create this headline. So if we just import this in, and this headline again could be a reusable component. Now we could add in anywhere in our application. So I'm going to add it in here. So create a new folder named headline. This will have an index.jsx file, and also we also need to create a style.jsx file. So with this one, I'm just going to bring in the code or the styling in once again. So we are bringing in style from style components, and then we have a container. So this styling over here is essentially what we saw in our code here. So the styling will have the background, a border radius around it, with the color being the darker color and the white for the text. So going back into the code, what we need to do is we are using display grid and place items of center, which is centrally aligning the item, or this singular item in this case, of the headline. And then we also giving it a padding and then some styling for the p tag as well. So in here, we just want to do RFCE and then name this headline like so. And then instead of the div, we are importing the container from /styled like so. And then in the container, I'm going to render a p tag saying this is a test. Now if I save all and go into my application, as you can see, there is an error. So we need to find out what the error is and why nothing is showing up in the application. So because we have created this headline here, if I go back into my home component, I am importing the headline, but there's no import at the top. So if we use control space and add the import in here, so now if I save, as you can see now, it says this is a test. So that is now working correctly. what we now want to do is we want to create a data object. So in our data folder here, I'm just going to create a new file named index.js. So this is just going to have a JavaScript object inside, which will have all of the portfolio data inside. So what I want to do is export this so it's accessible across the application. So export const of portfolio data like so, which is equal to an object. So in this object, I'm going to have the following data. So the country, the name, the email, phone, and job title. We will keep them in for now. If I then go into my headline now, and in here, we will be using JavaScript to import the resume or portfolio data. So all we do is we have curly brackets like so. So anything in here is JavaScript that we can use. So I want to get access to the portfolio data object. So as you can see, it is auto suggesting the portfolio data. So now I can import that in from index.data.js here. So now I want to get access to portfolio data.name. Now, if I save all and see if the name comes through, we should see the name Imran Codes in here. So as you can see, it is showing Imran Codes in here. We also need the job title and the UK as the country. So going back to the code, if we add a dash in here, so again, I want to copy this, and instead of name, it's going to be the job title, and then another dash in here. I'm going to type in based in and then this time it will be portfolio data dot country. So now if I save, we now have Imran Codes, front-end engineer based in the UK. So now that section is complete. Okay, so now that we have built the first two sections of the application, if we scroll down, as you can see here, we have a few sections that have the same title and the same borders at the bottom. So what I want to do is I want to create a higher order component this time. So this will split our page into sections, and then that way we don't need to repeat the same code over and over again of adding the styling of the border bottom underneath and the title also. So what I want to do is in my components again, I'm going to create a new folder in here named sections or section, and in here I'm going to have again the index.jsx file and also the styled.jsx file. So if we do rfce, and this will be named this section, essentially what I want to do is I want to create this component and wrap it around children component, and this section component will contain a h2 heading in here, and this will be passed down from its parent. So the way you pass down a value into a child component is something called props. So we receive props in our component from the parent. So in section here, we get access to something called props. And then in heading, I can get access to props dot, and in this case, it will be heading like so. And we will see the value when we pass it in a moment. And then also, we also get access to something called children from React. So what I want to do is instead of props here, I want to destructure it. So I am getting access to the specific element that I need or the value that I need. In this case, that will be heading like so. So if I just copy this and remove props here, and to destructure a value from props, all you do is add curly braces in here like so. And if we paste that in, we now have access to the heading in here. And we also want to get access to the children, which is from React. So if we do children like so, and then underneath the h2 of heading, we pass in children again in JSX brackets like so. And now if I save, we now in this component here, if we wrap this section around its children, we can then render different children as we are seeing on the completed application. Also, one final thing left to do is add a container. Again, we need to add the styling in the relevant /styled.jsx. So if I bring in the styles in, this time we are using the semantic HTML element of .section like so. This has some padding in here. We have a border bottom of 1px solid black, and then all the text will be aligned centrally. So as you can see in this final project, you can see the text aligned as center, and we also have the border at the bottom here. So now I've created my section component. We now need to use this component. So the way to use it is if we go into our home, in here, I'm going to import these sections like so. So inside here, anything that is a child will be rendered inside. So if I move this up into here, we can now render the about section in here. So for now, I'm just going to type in about like so. And now we need to import this section. And now if I save all, essentially what will happen is we will have all the styling of this section that we have just created wrapped around the about text. So if we go into our application and there is an error, so we need to find what the error is. So if we go into our section over here, we are passing in a heading, which we are not passing in at the minute. But what we are not doing is importing the container from the styles. So now if I save all, and you can see here, the about is now wrapped with the styling or with the padding at the bottom and the border at the bottom also. So what we want to do is now pass in titles for the relevant components that we need. So if we render the client, skills and experience, so I'll just do that now. So if we just copy this and render it underneath a few times. So the first section is the about section. We want the client to be next, so paste that in, and then this time it will be the client as a p tag, and eventually what will happen is these will be replaced with their individual components that we create. And then this time we are going to pass in a heading prop. So in my section we receive a heading. If we do receive a heading, then this h2 will get rendered. So a prop is a value being passed into its child. So if we pass that in now in the home layout, so in here, heading is equal to a string of heading or a string of clients. So now if I repeat this process for the rest of the components, so now as you can see, the app is more structured. We are now wrapping each individual section in its own section wrapper or higher order component. We are passing the relevant headings to the relevant sections. So now if we go into our browser and check this out, so as you can see now, instead of the p tags, what will eventually happen is we will replace these with the relevant components, but now we have a better structure in place for our project. Okay, so now we want to create the about section. So the about section is a 3-column layout, and this will be a module in itself. So with the modules folder, I'm going to move that into my home folder like so. So this means that any modules within this home layout page, I can specifically add its relevant sections and components in here. So if I was to create another page, what I can do then is create the contact page, for example, and then add its own modules inside here. For the components above in this folder, these are global components that we can access throughout the application. So in modules, what I want to do is create a new folder named about. And in here, I'm going to again create an index.jsx and also a styled.jsx. And in my component, I'm just going to do rfce, and I'm going to name this about like so. Again, this is going to be a container that we need to create in our style.js. And in this container, we are going to have 3 sections. So I'm going to create the left column. So this will be named left column in our style component. And we are going to render a p tag in here, just saying left. And we want to do the same for the right column. So we will be using Flexbox again for responsive design on this. And then in the middle, I'm just going to bring in my image. So now what we need to do is create the left, right column and container. And also we need to create a size for the image. So if I save, and then in my style.jsx, I'm going to just bring in my styles. So we have a container. So display of flex, align items off center. So this basically puts into a row and aligns items centrally on the horizontal axis. And then we want to justify content of space between, so everything is spaced evenly and equally. The image is going to have a width of 45 viewport width, so it's always responsive as we adjust the screen size. And then when it hits the media query of 768, so the tablet size, we're going to then have a flex direction of column. So the left, middle, and right columns will be adjusted to a column size as opposed to the 3 grid layout. And then we're also going to give it a width of 100%. So now if I save all, and if we check what it looks like in the browser, what we now need to do is import the about section actually. So going back into my home, we have now created the about component. So we import that in, and now if I save and go in here, as you can see, something is not working, so it's not rendering anything on the page. If we click command and click through to the component, we are not importing the styles across. So if we click Control Space, we can do import this way. Another way we can import is if we do import store, so everything as styled. What then we can do is we can import like so, so style dot, and then if we do the same across the other components, so style dot left column, style dot right column, and style dot container. So now if I save and go into here, we can see here we have a left column, the image, and also a right column, like so. So now what I want to do is render out the left column. So we have data in here of the biography, contact, and services. So this is the job info. So what we need to do is render that on the left column. So as you can see here, each piece of section is quite similar. So all the sections are similar. So what I'm going to do is create a reusable component because all of these are the same. They have a title and a description underneath. So if we create that now, so if I create the data first of all, so in my index.js, if I press enter after job title and paste in my job info, what I have got here is an array, as you can see, of objects. So each object has an ID, a title, and a description, and we want to map through this. So with JavaScript arrays, we have a method called map where we can map through the data, and for each item in the data, we can render certain UIs. So if I go back into my about page, if I open this index object on the side, so we have it side by side, what we want to do is render a title. So if I use my JSX expressions and title in here, we now need to get access to the job info in the portfolio data. So again, in my left column, I want to have JSS brackets in here, and I want to access the portfolio data. So if I control space this and import this in at the top, and then portfolio data dot, and then as you can see, we have a list of properties we can access. So we want to access the job info property in here. And then because it's an array, as you can see here, we want to then map through it and render a p tag of title for each item. So we should have 3 items in total. So job info.map. So for each job in here, I want to implicitly return. Implicitly return means that we don't need to type in the return and the parentheses in. We can just return the whatever is needed in here. So we want to render out the p tag of job.title. So now if I save and go across to our application, something isn't loading, so we need to see and debug this now. I now need to save all because we never saved this object in the data file. So now if I go back in here, we can see biography, contact, and services. So now what I want to do is also add in the description. So again, if we copy this and add in job.description, like so. So we are getting the error of JSX expressions must have one parent element. So to solve this, all we do is create a React fragment like so, and then we can just move everything up into here. So now save, and now we have the job info rendering on the page here. So as you can see here, what I want to do is create a reusable component now and pass in the relevant props, and then we can render the reusable component again on the right side. So we want to do the same for the right side. So first of all, I'm going to delete all of this, and I'm going to render a new component named job info. So if I paste that in here and save, we are passing in a key. So for each item in the array, we want to have an individual key, a unique identifier. So in this case, the IDs are different and they are unique. So we are using the ID for the key. We are passing in the title in the job info component, and we are also passing in the job.description in the component also. So now what we need to do is create this job info component. So in my about module, what I'm going to do is create a new folder in here named job info. And if you had multiple components in the about section that you wanted to create reusable for, then you could create a components folder and then also inside there add multiple components. But for now, I'm just going to have the job info in here. And as we do with each component, we have an index.jsx in here, and then we have a styles.jsx also. So because we are passing in props for job info, which receives the title and description, I'm just going to add that in here. So RFCE, this is the job info, and then the props we are receiving is the title and description. So again, we can destructure this. So title and description. So now this job info is a reusable component. What I want to do is bring in the return JSX in here. So essentially, we will have a title, a description, of which its values will be the props title here and the props description here. As we do with all style components, we need to create its relevant styles. So what I need to do is cut this out of here. So Control X, as we are in the style.jsx already, and paste that in. And then in the style.jsx, I'm going to bring in the styles here. So essentially, we have a container that has a display of flex, a flex direction of column, and justify content of space between. So everything is on the horizontal axis. And we have styling for the title and description respectively in here. So now all I need to do is import these from /styled like so. And then now if I render this component in, so I need to import this component from the relevant folder in here. And now if I save all, and what I'm going to do is close these off. So we've created the job info component in the about section. So now I'm mapping through my job info data in this array here. We should see 3 job info components being rendered on the left column in here. So now if I go into my browser, and as you can see here, we are now rendering the left column correctly, similar to the finished application here, like so. So now all we need to do is the same for the right column. So the left column is complete, the image in the center is complete, and now for the right column, I just need to add in the right-hand column data. So in this case, that will be the job stats. So if I bring this in, and underneath after my job info array, I'm going to press enter and paste in my job stats, which again has ID, title, and description. And now all I want to do is, again, if we just copy this one across and bring that in here, and instead of job info this time, we want to map through the job stats. So now if I paste that in and now save, if I go into my application, as you can see now we have the about section complete. This is rendering the job info from our data object, and then this is rendering the job stats from our data object also. So now that is the about section complete, we will then next move on to the client section. Okay, so as you can see here on the client section, we have 5 different logos in here that we are mapping through, similar to what we did here with the left and right hand columns. We have the data in our data object and we're just mapping through and adding certain styling in place. So let's create this component now. So if I close down my about section, and if we go into our modules folder and create a new folder in here named client, and again we have our files of index.jsx and style.jsx. What we also need to do is add in the client or company logos data in here. So if I just bring that in, and again, what you can do is you can adjust this object file to whatever is relevant for yourself. So it's more personal to yourself. So if I paste that in, essentially we have image title, like so. So in my clients component, RFCE, and then clients like so. And what we are doing essentially is mapping through all of these images in here. So as we do with all of our components, we will have a container of display flex and align item center. So we need to create the style or import the styles in. So this will have a display of flex, align items centrally, justify content of space evenly. So each column will be even. When we go to a mobile design, it goes down to a column. The image width is 100 pixels, and then we have it as grayscale. So originally it is grayscaled, and then when we hover over it, it goes back to full color. So all I need to do now is Control Spacebar, import in the container, and now I just need to map over the company logos like so. So as we have done previously, we have our JSX brackets in here, and we want to import the portfolio data, and then you do the dot company logos dot map. So for each logo in here, we want to implicitly return an image, and this image will have the source of logo dot image like so, and then the alt will be logo dot title, as you can see on the right, logo dot title. And then I'm also going to give this a key as a unique identifier, so whenever we map over something, we need to give a key to whatever element we are mapping over. So the key in this case will be logo.id. So now, if I go into my home component, and instead of the p tag this time, I now want to render the client component like so, and it is being imported in. So now if I save and go into my browser, as you can see here, the client section is rendering the relevant logos for the companies or clients I've worked with. So now all we need to do is quite similar, is the same for the skills. So as you can see here, we are rendering items in here with a certain percentage, the title itself, and also the image like so. So now what we need to do is create the skill section. So if we go back into our application here, into our code, and in our index.js for the data, I'm just going to bring in the skills array now. So this is the array we're going to map over for our skills. So the skills section will be very similar to the client. So I'm going to create this component first of all. So skills, and then in my modules, I'm just going to create a new folder named skills. And again, we're going to have a new file in here named index.jsx and style.jsx. And as you can see, this is quite a handy pattern that we're working with in React. So essentially, we know what we're doing. We have our index in one file and we have our styles in another file. So now if I do RFCE, this is for our styles. So we don't need anything in here. We need the RFCE in our index file like so. And then this will be skills. And as you can see, we have imported in our skills. This will have its container that we need to bring in from our styled file. So what I'm going to do is in my skills, I'm just going to bring them in because it is similar to what we have already just done. And this is going to be portfolio data dot skills dot map. And for each skill that we have, we're going to render in a div that contains in a pill. So that is the circular pill that we have created. It has an image and a percentage inside. And then also underneath, we have the title being rendered too. So all we need to do now is import the styles for this. So if I paste these styles in, the container has the similar styles of display flex, aligns item center and justify content space evenly. The image has a width and a height of 80 pixels. And if I just comment this one out for now, I'll show you what it does in a moment. The pill has its own style, so it has a border radius, some padding, and also the background is light gray, and then certain styling for the percentage. So now what I need to do is import these from /styled like so. So now if I save all, and then what we need to do is go into our home and we need to import skills from the modules and skills. So now if I save and then view my browser, scroll down, and as you can see here, the skills are now rendering. But the only difference being that the images now are stretching to its container's width. So what we need to do is make it look a bit more formatted, similar to the completed application. So what happens is if we use the object fit property on the image CSS, we can then scale the image to its width and height, so within its size. So going back into my code, in the styles, if I go on uncomment this out, so object fit contain will contain its image so that the aspect ratio fits the width and the height. So now if I save and again view my images now, so now as you can see, the images look responsive and much better on here. So next up, I'm going to be working on the experience section. So if we go into our data object here, we have now just rendered the skills. So now if I just bring in my job descriptions array in here, this time we're going to have a 3-column layout and it's going to be separated and filtered by the certain year that I did the job in. So now if I save the job descriptions array in here, all I now need to do is create the experience module or component. So this will be experience, and then we just need to create that. So in my modules, create a new folder named experience, like so. And again, we will have the index and styles. And if I go into my index and RFCE, and then this is going to be the experience component. And in the experience component, I'm going to have a container. And in the container, I'm going to have 3 columns. So these will be 3 columns that we create in style components. So if I just copy these, and within each column, we're going to have a title. And the first title is going to be 2021 to present day. So now if I save, the second column is going to be 2016 to 2020. and then the final column is going to be 2012 to 2014. So now if I save, what we now need to do is create these style components for these. So if I go into style.js and copy everything across into my style.js, essentially we have a 3-column layout with the aligning the items as flex dot, justify content of space between, and then when we go to the tablet, it goes down to a column. In our column, we have flex direction of column and aligning the items as left on the text. The title, again, it has a different color, and then we also have the styling for the title on here. So in my index.js, I now need to import these from /styled, and then the title also. So now if I go back into my home, I now need to import the experience component. So now that is imported in here. And if I save all, and in my browser, we have 3 columns now that are rendering the relevant titles in here. So now what I want to do is, if I look in my final build, we have the relevant job descriptions in the relevant section. So what we are going to do is in each section, we're going to filter out the dates for each job. And then we are going to map over the data so that the relevant data is shown in the relevant section. So now what I'm going to do is in my job descriptions, we have the year, and this is a string, but what I'm going to do is delete these so they are numbers for each year that we have, just so we're working with a different data type. So what I now want to do is if I go back into my completed application, this is what I want as an individual component. So we have the job title in here and then the company name. This is similar to what we did up here where we had a similar reusable component. So I'm just going to create that and then we can map over the relevant jobs in our application. So in my experience folder, I'm going to create a new folder, and this is going to be job description, and this is going to receive some props as well. So again, index and style.jsx, and I'm just going to bring in my job description code over here. So essentially we bring in a title as a prop and a company as a prop. The styling we need to import also. So if I bring that in, and this time, instead of giving the H2 its own style component, what you can do is in the style.div, you can nest and style its individual H2 and its individual p tag again, like so, just showing you a different way of styling your components with style components. So now going back in here, I now need to import the container from .style, which I am already doing. So if I now save, I now need to render this component in each column. So if I do the first column, first of all, so it's going to be portfolio data, and then what did I call it? I called it job descriptions, .map. So for each job, I want to implicitly return the component that we just created, which is this one. So I'm going to bring this in, and the title is going to be job.title, the company is going to be job.company, and then the key is job.id, like so. I just need to import this component now from the relevant folder structure here. So now if I save and go into my browser, as you can see here, the entire list of job descriptions is rendering. So now I need to repeat this 2 more times. So if I just copy this across and do the same underneath here and the same underneath here, now save. As you can see, we have the relevant job descriptions being rendered on each column. So now what I want to do is filter out each job description based on the dates that are in the title. So the way to do that is using the filter method with JavaScript. So if I press enter here and bring the map down, and in my job descriptions, I want to filter. So I can first filter out the data based on a certain condition, and then I want to map the data and render out the relevant job description. So if I do .filter, so this is the same as the .map. So I have an item. So for each item in here, I only want to return the item that is equal to, the triple equal to, which is comparable with the data type. So in this case, we want to access the index year. So if item.year is triple equal to, and we're going to put in the number, so it's triple equal to 2022, or so we can add in other conditions in here. So or, and then I'm going to add in item.year is equal to 2021 this time. So now if I save and check the browser, as you can see here, it has now filtered out all of the jobs that are newer than 2021, so that will be 2 if we look at our data object. So anything between 2021 and 22. So now all I need to do is copy this and repeat this again. So paste that in, and then this time I want to have the year 2020 in here. I want to have the year 2019 in here also, and then one more which is 2016. So if we add that in as well. So now save, and then one final time we need to filter out the last section, which is 2012 to 14. So I had 2 jobs then, so that will be 2014 and 2012. And we can also remove this last or check in here. So now if I save and check my code, as you can see, each section has the relevant job descriptions as per the year that they were completed in. So next up, we will be doing the projects, which is my latest projects here. So these are rendering an image, the category, and the project name. Okay, so the project section is quite similar to what we have done in the components above. So all I'm going to do is bring this in and we can discuss it. So essentially, I need to create a new module in here. So I'm going to paste in my projects module. And now I have an index file in here. I now need to import the portfolio data from the relevant section and import that in. And then what I need to do is add a projects array in my data object. So if I bring that in also, which is the final object that we are going to be adding into this data object. So now if I save that, and essentially what we are doing is portfolio data.projects.map, and for each container, we're going to have an image, a category, and a title in there. And this is all responsive. So if we go into our projects and in styles, as you can see, we have the responsive styles in here. So now all that's left to do is copy this project into our home layout. So this component needs to be rendered, and then also we need to import that in like so. So now if I save all, and if we have a look at the project, as you can see here, the projects are now rendering. Essentially, it's just an image with 2 pieces of p tags on here. And then what we need to do is just change the title to my latest project. So I'll just quickly do that in the heading props. So my latest projects like so. So as you can see, that is most of the application complete. What we are going to be doing next is creating a modal. So if I go into my completed app, and this button here is coming from Material UI. So if we click on it, we have a modal where we can be contactable on. So this can be edited to however you would like. So we will do that next. Okay, so the last section that I want to create is the modal component, so the contact section. So essentially, if we click on here, we have the contactable details in the pop-up screen. So the way to do this is quite simple. If we have Material UI open already, all we need to type in the search box is modal, and then you can see here it's got a basic modal. So if we click on that, and then the modal that we want is the basic modal here. So as you can see, it pops up with some text. So if we go into here, we have the code already available to us in the component box. So what I want to do is just copy this and then go into my project, and in contact, I'm going to create a new component called contact, which is what we will be creating. And we don't need the modules anymore, so I'm just going to close them down. And because the contact button will be reusable, I'm going to add it into the components folder above here. So create a new folder named contact, and we just want to have a new file in here named index.jsx only, because there won't be any styling because that will be coming from Material UI. So if I paste in the code that I copied, I just need to do a few changes. So this is the style for the modal itself. I'm going to rename this basic modal to contact, which is what I named it as initially. The relevant imports are coming from Material UI, so we don't need to import anything from there. And if I go back into my home component and click Control Space and now save, we should have a modal popping up in our browser now. So going back in here, if I click Open Modal, as you can see, it is opening the modal. So there are a few changes that I want to make for this to be showing my relevant data. So going back into my code, in the contact component, I'm going to keep the styling in here as that's required for the modal. So we'll keep that. We have a piece of state in here to say that if open is true, then we want to show the modal. we have helper functions in here. So handle open is when it sets the open to true, and if it is true, then the modal will show, and if we close, then set open to false. The button, I'm just going to bring in my own button in here. So if we copy my code and replace this button with my button, essentially I've got a variant of contained, a large size. When we click on it, it opens the modal, and then we have a store icon of contacts icon. So I need to import this in from Material UI. So if I copy this and import it in at the top, so this is just the icon that I've searched from the Material UI's icon library. You can replace that with whatever you wish. So now if I save and go back into my browser, as you can see here, it says contact Imran, and if I click, we just need to amend this text in here now. So again, going back in here, I now want to remove the typography in this box. You can keep these ARIA labels in, but I'm just going to remove them. And then in my box, I'm going to bring in my relevant text. So if I copy this and explain it, so I have, you can contact me below, which is the initial text. I have the typography for email and phone, which is a ahref, and the first one is a mail to. So now what I want to do is, instead of resume data, this is going to be portfolio data, and then we want to import this from portfolio data, which is at the top here. So what I am doing is mail to the portfolio data.email. So if we was to go into our index, at the very top we have an email address and a phone number. So essentially that is the placeholder text in here, and also with the ahref of tel this time, we can call the telephone number in our data object. The way this happens is, in our ahref we have JSX parentheses, and then inside that we have template literals, so that we can pass in a certain variable for our telephone number. This is the same for the email address also. So now if I save and check this out in the browser, if I click on here and hover over, in the corner here, you can see mail to imran@imrancodes.com, which is my email address, and then also the telephone number of 07777777, which is just a random placeholder number that I've put in. So now, if I click out of that, one final thing is I want to edit the color of this Material UI button here. So the way to do that is in my index.css. So if I go back into my code, in here, to override Material UI's styling, we need to give an important tag like so. So then that way it overrides the styling for whatever element you want to style. So in this case, it's all of the Material UI buttons. So now if I save and check our final application, as you can see, everything is complete in here. If I inspect and reduce the screen size, what happens is it is responsive. So now on mobile, as you can see, it goes from display flex to flex direction column. So it is responsive on mobile also. And if I click on the modal, as you can see, even the Material UI modal is responsive as well. So now that is the application complete. What we will do next is deploy our code onto GitHub, and then finally we will deploy our application onto the web. Okay, so to deploy our code, there are a couple of ways of doing it. I'll show you the easiest way of doing it. So as you can see here on the left, there's a little icon with number 36 on it. This means that we have done 36 different changes onto this application. So because we connected at the start to a repository on GitHub, all we need to do now is type in a commit message in here. So what we have essentially done is created a portfolio application with React. And now all I need to do is, if we click commit here, would you like to stage all your changes and commit them directly? Click yes. So now all I need to do is, in these three dots here, I now need to click push, and this will then push all of the changes from this branch into the code on GitHub. So now all I need to do is, if I go into my browser and in my application, scroll to the top onto my GitHub. So if I click this link, if I go into my repositories and click React Portfolio, we can see updates and changes have been made 31 seconds ago or a minute ago. If I then click in here and in source, as you can see, all of my components are showing up on here. If I go back into source and in my layouts, you can see modules are here appearing. If I was to double check my projects and index.jsx, you can see my code is now showing up in my GitHub over here. So now all that's left to do is upload this code onto the internet and get a URL for this. Okay, so the easiest way to deploy your application is quite simple. What we need to do is everything is complete in our GitHub now. So we have that uploaded to GitHub. What we now want to do is create a build folder. So the easiest way to do that is in our terminal, npm run build, and then this will strip off all the excess weight of the application and create a lightweight bundle. So as you can see here, we have an index.html file, a CSS and JS file in here. So now this disk folder is ready to be uploaded to the web. So going into the browser, if you go over to netlify.com, once you sign in, you see this dashboard in here. And once you have signed in successfully, if you click add new site and then click deploy manually, so all you need to do now is the disk folder that we have just created, which is this one here. We need to now find that in our folder structure and then add it into our drag and drop. So if we go in here and click browse to upload, and then if you find the relevant disk folder and add it in here, so browse to upload, in my portfolio-yt, I have a dist folder. So if I click upload onto this, and now what will happen is this should upload my React application onto the web. So now I have a URL here. So if we click onto this URL, as you can see now, we have our final deployed application on the web here, like so. So now, as you can see, it was as simple as that to deploy your application, and feel free to enhance this website further and tailor it to your specific needs. You can also change the fonts, which would make it look better. You could also add some more color into it. You can also add extra elements in here. You could also improve the modal, improve it, make it look better. But what I wanted to do was give a brief and basic understanding of React, along with the elements that we have covered at the start of the video. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.